We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self-development and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner-Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. That's me, I'm your host. So we've spent probably around 8 episodes looking at what I call the masculine introject, how it operates inside men, how it forms in boys, and what it does to relationships, health, bodies, and sexuality. I've also looked at specific mechanisms, data, and specific costs involved in all of this. And all of that kind of work is real and necessary. But there's a question underneath this which we haven't really asked yet. And that is, what kind of world makes this formation nearly so universal? What is the civilizational condition in which the values we've been examining, like territoriality, hierarchy, acquisition, competition, and combativeness, become the dominant organizing logic, not just of individual psychology, but of the whole culture? So what I want to do today is to approach that question from a direction you might possibly find surprising and potentially not actually even expect. And that is, I want to draw on a concept from Hindu cosmology that I think provides one of the most precise available descriptions of exactly that civilizational condition. And that is the concept of Kali Yuga. Now, I want to be upfront about what I'm doing. I'm drawing on a concept from a specific tradition, Hindu Puranic philosophy, that has its own cosmological claims and theological commitments. I'm using it as a diagnostic lens, not adopting it wholesale, and I'm not asking you to accept it as a cosmic fact. What I'm asking is something much simpler, and I think more interesting. And that is this one of the most precise descriptions we have of the civilizational waters we're all swimming in? And if it is, what does it mean for the work we've been discussing all season? Now, there is one other tradition. There was an article written, and I can't remember who by, but he drew on the work of Petrarch. So I might cover that in another episode following on from this, but right now let's stay with the Hindu cosmology. So let's start with what the concept actually says, because it's frequently misrepresented in popular usage, like a lot of stuff. Kali Yuga comes from Hindu cosmological texts, principally the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Purana, and related Puranic literature. It is the fourth and final stage in a recurring cycle, and the emphasis is cycle, of 4 ages. Satya Yuga, the age of truth, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. The cycle is not a fall from grace and then termination. As I said, it is a cycle. After Kali Yuga, renewal and the whole sequence begins again. Now, some might recognize some of that in Nordic pagan thinking. So, first important point, Kali here does not refer to the goddess Kali. The Sanskrit root here is different. Kali Yuga derives from a term associated with strife, discord, conflict, and decay. It is, in literal translation, the age of strife. So what does Kali Yuga describe? Well, the traditional texts offer a detailed picture. Truth becomes less valued than convenience. Leaders pursue power rather than wisdom. Wealth becomes the primary measure of a person's worth. Family and community bonds weaken. Religious forms persist while spiritual depth declines and shallows. Now, one of the consequences is that anxiety, greed, conflict, and alienation intensifies. Appearance is mistaken for virtue. Force increasingly substitutes for justice. The Bhagavad Purana contains a passage that many readers find startling in its specificity. Wealth alone will be considered the sign of a person's worth. What have we been talking about? Not character, not wisdom, not relational depth or genuine care. Wealth acquisition is the benchmark. The ability to accumulate and display. It's performative. Now you will notice that I could have lifted the list of characteristics from the introduction to almost any episode of this season, and it would have fit without alteration. Wealth as the measure of worth. That's the acquisition pillar in making good men great. Force substituting for justice. That's the combativeness as well as the hierarchy. Appearance mistaken for virtue. That's the Manosphere and its whole entire aesthetic project. Community bonds weakening. That's the loneliness data that we've been looking at in the previous episodes. Now, I want to be careful here about the level at which I'm using this concept. Kali Yuga, as a cosmological claim about the structure of sacred time, is a theological position I'm not endorsing. I'm not asking you to adopt it. But Kali Yuga, as a psychological and civilizational description, that's different. And that's where I think it does specific work that our other frameworks don't necessarily do as well in the traditional sense. The psychological reading goes like this. Rather than viewing Kali Yuga as an astronomical epoch occurring independently of human consciousness, we can understand it as a description of what happens to individuals and societies when they lose connection to deeper values and become organized instead around status, consumption, domination, and immediate gratification. On that reading, Kali Yuga is not only a period in cosmic time, it is a recurring condition of consciousness. One that can characterize an individual life, a culture, a historical moment or period, or all three simultaneously. In Jungian terms, Kali Yuga resembles what Jung calls the domination of collective consciousness by shadow material. The shadow, in analytic psychology, is the part of the psyche that contains what's been rejected, suppressed, and denied. In healthy psychological development, the shadow's integrated. It's acknowledged, related to, and brought into relationship with a conscious personality rather than expelled and projected outward. When the shadow domination instead, you get a psychologically organized concept around aggression, projection, externalization, inflation, and the refusal, and this is very important, of genuine self-examination. You get, in other words, exactly the structure we've been calling the masculine introject. Now, the masculine introject can be seen as a Kali Yuga formation. That's the claim that I want to make explicitly. The 5 pillars in making good men great: territoriality, hierarchy, acquisition, competition, combativeness, are not random harmful attitudes that boys happen to absorb from bad environments. They are the psychological form that a Kali Yuga civilizational condition takes within individual men. A civilization organized around strife, acquisition, and the whole domination of appearance over substance produces in men an inner structure that's organized around exactly those same principles. It explains why the masculine introject is so pervasive and so durable and so resistant to change through simple informational good intentions. It isn't a set of mistaken beliefs that can be corrected with other forms of information or education. It is the psychological interior of the civilizational condition itself. To change, it requires not just new information, but a different orientation toward the self and the world, which is exactly what every wisdom tradition, including this one, describes as the appropriate response to exactly this kind of age. And this is absolutely also true of making good men great as a framework. Now, on the surface, it's relatively straightforward, but the depth to it is a lot more considerable, and I'll go into that as we progress through the season. And here is where the cyclical structure of Kali Yuga becomes therapeutically important rather than just simply a cosmological abstract. The tradition doesn't say this age leads to collapse and termination. It says that this age leads to renewal. Darkness is the precondition for the renewal of light. You know, there's lots of quotations in the literature and wisdom traditions and philosophy that tell you that, you know, before things get better, they generally get worse. And again, more specifically, it says that the demand for genuine spiritual and psychological depth is actually greater in Kali Yuga because the suffering and confusion generated by the age creates in people a hunger for something real. The very condition that suppresses wisdom simultaneously creates the demand for it. Now remember, it's not either or. In Making Good Men Great, I talk about and also as a formidable construct in understanding the relationship between concepts, relationship, people, the whole bit. Now, let me put it this way. That's not optimism. It's something more useful than optimism. It's a structural account of why the work we've been discussing all season isn't swimming against an irresistible tide. It's responding to a genuine demand created by the age itself. I want to situate this more concretely because I think the risk with a concept like Kali Yuga is that it becomes an elegant abstraction that doesn't connect to anything specific. Now let me connect it to what we've actually been seeing this season. The Manosphere is not a collection of bad individuals. It is what Kali Yuga ideology looks like when it's got access to algorithmic amplification. Take the defining characteristics of Kali Yuga. Wealth is the measure of worth. Appearance is mistaken for virtue. Force is substituting for justice. And community bonds erode. And you have a precise description of the Manosphere's actual doctrine. The sexual market value framework measuring men in numerical scores, the idealized body as a proof of worth, the rhetoric of dominance over negotiation and consent, the atomized individualism that has replaced genuine community with competitive display. Remember, Margaret Thatcher, and yes, we go back a while, her comment was that there was no such thing as society. Well, this is a reflection. This is how it's articulated into words. Now, the male loneliness data that we looked at in the previous episode is the statistical expression of exactly what Kali Yuga describes when it says community bonds weaken. The health-seeking gap we examined, which means that men generally die 4 years earlier than they need to because they won't acknowledge need, is what happens when a civilization measures worth through invulnerability. The body image crisis we looked at in a previous episode is the commodification of the body that acquisition logic inevitably produces when it runs on living tissue. None of these are separate crises. They're the same crisis viewed from different angles. And the concept that names the single underlying condition with the greatest precision is this one. An age organised around strife, acquisition, and the substitution of appearance for substance is what we're experiencing. Now, historians caution in the user's document something that's worth acknowledging. Every era tends to imagine itself as living in a time of decline. I've heard politicians banging on how if we don't vote for the right party, we're going to descend into apocalyptic destruction. Well, it still hasn't happened yet. And lots of religious cults, bang on about the, impending demise of humanity, the rapture. Still hasn't happened. They keep coming up with different dates, but so far, nada. The things that we do need to pay attention to, which somehow misses to get real traction, is about climate change, and it's about authoritarianism and militarization. Now, coming back to the point, human beings are prone to nostalgia and moral panic in roughly equal measure. Now, I hold that caution that we need to be careful here. But I also note that the specific combination we're currently navigating, algorithmic amplification of the most distorted content, and the pharmacological commodification of bodies, the literal construction of ideological architectures around the equation of male worth with sexual acquisition, the loneliness epidemic documented across multiple countries and multiple methodologies. This specific combination does have features that previous moral panic narratives lacked. The Kali Yuga description isn't simply things were better before. It describes a structural condition with specifiable characteristics, and those characteristics are present and measurable now in ways that warrant some diagnostic attention. But the more important point is this: with a cyclical framework, the question is never how do we prevent Kali Yuga. The question makes no sense within that cosmology. The question is, what is the appropriate response to living in this age? What does this particular civilizational moment demand of those who can see it clearly? The Hindu tradition that teach Kali Yuga don't have the question of response unanswered. They're actually quite specific about it. And that specificity is striking in our context. The appropriate response to Kali Yuga is what the traditions call dharmic practice, the deliberate cultivation of qualities that the age systematically suppresses. In an age of strife, the cultivation of genuine peace is one of those. In an age of acquisition, the practice of non-grasping, non-attachment is appropriate. In an age of externalization and display, what's appropriate is the cultivation of inner depth and self-knowledge, self-awareness. In an age of fragmentation, the deliberate building of genuine community and relational bonds is paramount. Now, what have we been describing all season? I'll give you an example. Conscious fathering that interrupts the transmission of masculine introject is one of those things. Another is the cultivation of genuine emotional intimacy rather than its substitution with performance. Another one is the willingness to seek help, to acknowledge need in an age that measures worth through invulnerability. The development of interoceptive awareness, inhabiting the body as an object, as a subject, rather than managing it as a competitive project. The construction of a sexual script grounded in genuine recognition of the other person rather than in the performance of acquisition. I'm going to get me a girlfriend. None of these are therapeutic self-improvement projects in any sense of the word. All of them are, in the Kali Yuga frame, dharmic practice. It is the cultivation of precisely what the age suppresses, and in direct and deliberate opposition to the civilizational current. So when someone says to you, as you're raising, the issue of being, an activist or, practicing a particular tradition, that you're a daydreamer and you're living out of step, take that as a compliment, because you should be, in many respects, out of step with the mainstream. Let me refer to somebody who I think, deserves a special mention here as well. Marcus Aurelius, whose Stoic practice we talked about earlier on, was writing his meditations as the Roman Empire was beginning the long process of internal fragmentation that would eventually end it. Now, here was a man in a position of enormous power, trying every day to practice wisdom in an age that didn't actually reward wisdom. It rewarded spectacle. Now, he wasn't naive about the age. He saw it with considerable clarity. What he chose was neither despair nor denial. He chose practice. The deliberate daily cultivation of the qualities: reason, justice, equanimity, and genuine care. that and it was that the surrounding culture in Rome was in fact eroding. Now that's the model I want to leave this episode with. Not a cosmic consolation. Not a prediction that things will get better in the next few years because the cosmological timetable doesn't offer that kind of comfort. And I wouldn't trust it if it did. But here's something more reliable. A structural reason why the work this season that we've been, following does something reliable. It has been describing matters and why it matters more, not less, in exactly the kind of age we appear to be living. That is the model I want to leave this episode with. Not a cosmic consolation, not a prediction that things will get better in the next few years. Because the cosmological timeline doesn't offer that kind of comfort, and I wouldn't trust it if it did. But something more reliable, a structural reason why the work this season has been describing matters and why it matters more, not less, in exactly the kind of age we appear to be living in. The age generates the demand for its own antidote. The men who can see clearly enough to practice it are not swimming against an impossible tide. They are, in the language of this tradition, doing exactly what the age asks of those capable of asking the right question. The question isn't, how do I succeed in this age? The question is, what does this age need from me that the age itself cannot produce? Now the answer is the same as it's always been. Honesty. Genuine relational depth. The willingness to be known and the courage to name what is happening. And then the daily practice of what is true. Now I want to encourage all of you in the community to move on to the Patreon reflection for this episode, which includes a short reading list and some places to go if this conversation has opened a door in your mind. And I'll see you there. Until next time, stay curious, stay honest, and keep doing the work.
On this show, we talk a lot about living with purpose, slowing down, paying attention, and being intentional about the choices we make every day. Because when we simplify the noise around us, we can better hear what really matters. Empathy, connection, and showing up as the best version of ourselves. That's why I'm genuinely pleased to welcome our newest sponsor, Distill Union. Their philosophy aligns beautifully with what we do here. Distill Union creates slick, thoughtfully designed essentials. Wallets, key organizers, phone cases, all built with a less is more approach. Their Wally wallets, Ferris key organizers, these are everyday tools that make life easier, cleaner, and calmer. In that simplicity, there's space for clarity. There's space for change. As a thank you to our Inspire Change community, they're offering 20% off any product with the promo code INSPIRECHANGE. Have a look, try them out, and see how simplifying your day can open the door to something deeper. Visit distillunion.com and enjoy 20% off any product with the promo code INSPIRECHANGE. That's distillunion.com with promo code INSPIRECHANGE to check out.
Hello to all our listeners. We thank you for tuning in and supporting positive social change, which makes you a part of Gunter's efforts in transforming not only men's lives, but lives in general. And we are grateful that you have joined us. We want to extend a huge thank you to our listeners in Olney and Silver Spring for bringing Maryland to number 7 on the top 10 USA listeners list. And to our global listeners, we extend our gratitude to our listeners in London and Caerphilly for bringing the UK up to number 9 on the global listeners list. Congratulations! You made it to the top listeners list. I, Devonna Prinzi, the co-executive producer, and our showrunner, Miranda Spigner-Sapone, sincerely thank you and ask that you please take the time to like, follow, subscribe, and share, as your efforts make a difference to everyone here at Inspire Change with Gunter. If these stories resonate with you and you would like to engage more with Gunter and the Inspire Change team, please consider joining our Patreon community, where our members find bonus content and early access to video episodes. Membership awaits at patreon.com/Inspire Change. That's patreon.com/INSPIRECHANGE. As always, thank you to each and every one of our listeners. And most importantly, please keep inspiring positive social change.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.